up the Colin and the Donovan, because that's what's that? Let's get ready.
Another thing that I have a huge problem with, that we kind of talked about a little bit last week when John Sadek was here, is, and Colin even lent to it a little bit, is talking about the politicization of the Supreme Court. So many of our issues, I believe, especially regarding laws, come down from this, and there was a huge moment where Joe Biden was talking about Roe v. Wade being on the ballot in the courts, and this is on the ballot in the courts, and all this stuff is on the ballot in the courts, and that's because he is presuming with open evidence of the way that Judge Amy Coney Barrett is going to rule on certain cases if they're put in front of her in the Supreme Court. I understand, because like I said, of the evidence of the things that she's written, the things that she said, why people would think that she might rule that way. But we've also seen just in the last 4 years through Neil Gorsuch and through Brett Kavanaugh that the people that have written certain things and espouse certain opinions will not necessarily rule that way, because that's not their fucking job.
Yeah.
And bless you, so many people, regular citizens, are not able to get past that because their parents and the media is telling you this is a liberal judge, this is a conservative justice, oh, they hate Roe v. Wade, they hate all this shit. They're embedding it in you that you can't even conceive of somebody ruling against their personal opinion, because why would they fucking do that? Because it's not their job. We should all hope, please, everyone, don't hear what I'm not saying, right? In the context of this conversation, we should all hope for more justices like Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch, because they have gone in there and they have ruled against things, ruled in ways that go against their personal opinions that they hold politically and personally. That's what a good judge does. That's what a good Supreme Court justice does. Yeah. It's not about their opinion. It's about the way that the Constitution is laid out. And I was saying that you had talked about that just in like the previous topic, that so many of our problems are coming from that. And people are just not even taught that anymore, So I had a huge problem with Joe Biden talking about things being on the ballot in the courts. You know what I'm saying? Because that's not the way we should even be explaining things to people. Is for sure if Donald Trump puts somebody in, they're going to rule against Roe v. Wade. You're not going to be able to get abortions. Your uterus is locked up. You don't have any women's rights anymore. Hold on. Yeah. That's a fucking woman. She's a woman. That's a lady. And you're talking about how she's against women's rights. She's a fucking woman. Like, I'm shocked it's like a...
Well, the nice thing is it's not gaining too much traction anymore.
No,
a lot of these things are being thrown against her, and then it's like, not really.
The women's rights thing...
You can't just smear him like he did Kavanaugh.
Right.
Smear her.
Using women's rights as like
the shield.
A pseudonym for like abortion rights, you know what I'm saying, is really odd, because that's like just to say that there are no women who are pro-life, you know what I'm saying, that don't believe that should happen, which is not fucking true, and I think that's fucking weird.
But like when you take the point of the argument, when you take a stand in the argument where you say, okay, no, I support a woman's right to choose. That's the ultimate woman's right.
Right.
And so they devolve it to that 150,000 foot view of it, and then they could just say, well, she's not for women's rights. I mean,
it's weird,
bro.
That's a weird.
How you are trying to? I know what you're saying.
That's a hard sell.
I don't know how you're trying to justify that.
That's a hard sell.
It is.
Like calling black people racist, and like the new, and this is like slightly off, but like just in the last couple of weeks, because of Amy Coney Barrett, right? Of like, oh well, so people who adopt black children, like they can also be racist.
Courtesy of Ibram X. Kendi, author of How to Be an Anti-Racist.
I suppose
one of the most racist public figures that I have experienced in my lifetime.
I suppose that it is certainly possible for a white person to be racist and also adopt black children, but it does seem that it would be counter to their core ideals to take care of somebody that they believe is inherently inferior to them. And that's not to say that they couldn't adopt them to mistreat them. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I'm sure that there's at least one example somebody could
try to quote unquote, better.
Right. But there doesn't seem to be any evidence that
I think humans are better
Judge
than that.
Amy Coney Barrett is adopting children from Haiti, I believe, to hold power over them, to exhibit, wipe. I don't. That's a
or
hard
to
sell,
convert them
from
their savage ways or whatever.
That seems
Abraham X. Kendi
really weird.
Yeah. You gotta really despise humanity, I think, to believe that is, you can't believe that it doesn't exist, because I'm sure it does.
Certainly it does.
Right? But
and
you have to be really fucked up to think that that's the norm.
Well, that's what Ibram Kendi was like. He's like, I'm not saying that this is what he was tweeting when he's like, I'm not saying this is what she's doing, but historically people have, adopted black children so that they can do this and this and this. Like, if you're not saying that's what she's doing, then why are you bringing that up when you're talking about her, like, having adopted 2 children from Haiti?
I'm not saying, but I'm just saying.
Right. I'm not saying that you're a racist, but a lot of racists I know do that type of shit. That's just weird. And
that's where we're at.
And it's like totally acceptable, to like call her a racist, even though she has fucking black. That's so backwards, bro. I just don't understand.
Yeah. But again, I think the effectiveness, like on a political level and, on a confirmation level, we'll say, I think the effectiveness of those are not as sticky as they would be hoping for.
Right. I just mean the willingness to attribute things to people before they've even met them. They not even met them, because I know and most people will likely not ever meet any of the Supreme Court justices, but people that they literally know nothing about.
But I mean, it's very, I don't want to say it's very similar, because that was a really intense situation, but what they did with Kavanaugh, like all these things, like,
right.
The fact that somebody's willing to believe something like what Abraham X. Kendi is spouting at this point, without giving them the benefit of the doubt of being a modern day human being, and just assuming that they are the worst person. Somebody that did that and believes in that kind of thing, you could label as one of the worst human beings on the face of the planet at this point. To assume that out of all the people, she's one of those, that just seems like on a fundamental human level.
Yeah.
You got some real growing up to do, because that is a disgusting idea to think of how the world might be.
And I think from like you were talking about earlier, on like an individual stance of a regular person, I can see from the way that the Supreme Court has taught to people why an individual might assume things about a certain justice. But it's, I think, particularly dark for me to see a presidential candidate on the stage openly saying that this is how it's going to be, when that's so counter to how it should be, and he knows that. And that's kind of what I was talking about. Like, at that point of being president, like, so much of your job is optics and ideological things. And like, so if you're not even expressing the right ideology, then like, I can't buy in for that, and then like,
it runs counter to the core, I guess you'd have to call it an ideology at that point. The American ideology, the core fundamental of liberty and freedom. And if your ideology runs counter to that, how are you even in this race? You don't belong in the system that we are in, obviously.
And because that's not even a hurdle anymore, right, especially for the Democratic Party, there's now the discussion, and Joe Biden refused to answer this question, of packing the courts, right, or just doing away with a filibuster, right? And
he refuses. I listened to fucking Shapiro, I think from Friday. I listened to it today. He played clips of Biden being asked that, like, I think 12 different times. Refuses to answer that question.
Which
is in political speech, that tells us that, like, it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's probably a good probability that he's probably down for it, which means it's an unpopular decision, which also means he's not going to talk about it right now.
Right.
Because if you look at the ideology that is backing him to become president, it runs deep. I mean, everything from the PSA type folks to the
Elizabeth
MSNBC
Warren,
folks. And within the party themselves.
Right.
Like, that's why he will not refuse to answer that question, is because he can't say the answer. Because it is literally, like, fundamentally, if he was to say, we're going to look at that next, he fundamentally should not be running for president.
Right.
Because that is not okay.
Which I think is probably one of the better points that President Trump could have made, is because it was
just
around
incapable of making them.